Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. So glad that you could join me here today. My name is Heidi Roth. I'm a registered dietitian and health coach, and so glad that you are all here with us. Just a couple housekeeping things. I've opened up the chat box, so please feel free to use that for any questions. You will not be able to unmute yourself during the webinar, so but happy to answer questions, and it's always nice to kind of have that interaction while I'm talking. And then I'll leave about 5 minutes at the end for some questions as well. So our topic today is nutrition resilience, kind of a new kind of topic, but it's actually a very pertinent topic and interesting too. So some of the questions that we're going to be answering today or talk about today: what is resiliency, and how does what we eat affect our resiliency? Which foods will contribute to our brain health, energy, mood, and resiliency? Okay, so a gentle reminder that this webinar is for informational purposes only. Please seek the advice of your healthcare practitioner for questions related to your individual care. So what's resiliency? Well, we know resiliency can be defined in many ways, but basically it's bouncing back from some of life's challenges, growing and thriving in adverse times. I was trying to think of examples of maybe resilient resilient figures in history. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, all you have to do is look over at Ukraine and all of those people there, and the kind of the definition of resiliency, right? But we can cultivate resiliency as well. And it's like building a muscle. It takes some time and intention. It's not necessarily something that everyone is automatically born with, but it's something that we can deliberately cultivate. So what are some of the ways that we can boost resiliency or cultivate resiliency? Well, there's been, many different ways identified, and we're not really going to focus on how to do that, in terms of what I've listed here, but we're going to be focusing on boosting our brain health. So different things like prioritizing relationships, joining a group, finding like-minded people, like, oh, wow, like, that happened to you too. And, I'm not the only one going through this. Cultivating empathy and compassion, helping others. When we help others, we're a lot less focused on our own issues, right? Pumping up the positivity, being a little bit more positive, a little bit less Eeyore, right? More glass half full versus half empty. Embracing humor. But one of the ways to embrace resiliency too is to focus on brain health. If your brain isn't healthy in a biochemical and physiological way, it's really hard to have all these other things going on when our brain is unhealthy. So the healthier that we can make our brain, just even from like a biochemical standpoint or a physiological standpoint, the better we're going to be able to boost our resiliency. And there's many different ways to focus on your brain health, getting enough sleep, getting some exercise, managing stress. All of these things are really important for your brain. But one of the biggest things that's important for your brain is actually food. And we know, even going back to 431 BC, that Hippocrates, he's considered to be the father of medicine, he said, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." And so, for thousands of years, really, humans have been using food as medicine. We've kind of gotten away from it in the past 100 years or so with all of the wonderful medicines that we have now. But fortunately, we're recognizing a lot more that food is powerful. Food can be medicine. And there's a whole new branch that recognizes this in psychiatry called nutritional psychiatry. I don't know if anyone has heard of this term before, but it's really kind of recent studies that support the connection between the quality of the diet, your gut microbiota, and mental health. So helping your brain with food. If you Google nutritional psychiatry, you'll get about 35 million results. Not so many results with nutrition resiliency, but we know that whatever you can do to help your brain, you're going to be more able to do all the things that can boost your resiliency as well. So how do we go about eating to boost our brain? I guess one of the questions first would be to ask, how does food affect our brain? You know, what part of your body decides our mood? So I'm seeing here in the comments section, someone said brain food and trusting your gut. So you know the gut is a big important part, right? We have two brains actually. Of course, the one we know about in our head, right? That weighs about 3 pounds, produces neurotransmitters. It's mostly fat and water, uses up a lot of energy, 25% of the body's glucose, 20% of our oxygen. So our brain is really metabolically active. But the other brain, someone here said, trust your gut, and is in our gut. So our gut has the same tissues, that same brain tissue during fetal development. And serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's kind of known for kind of helping to stabilize our mood. And 95% of serotonin is manufactured, stored, and used in our gut, not our brain. Which I've had to go over that number several times. Like really, because you think of neurotransmitters as always kind of originating in your brain and being used in your brain, right? Serotonin and dopamine and all these, norepinephrine. But serotonin is mainly in our gut. How does this happen? Our brain and our gut talk to each other all day long through something called the brain-gut axis, using the vagus nerve and our gut microbiota. Here, the vagus nerve is a nerve that goes, from our brain down to our gut. And this brain-gut axis, where we kind of have that gut feeling or butterflies in our stomach, or we get a gut response to something. How does that work? Well, as we mentioned, there's a lot of communication going on between your gut and your brain. And our gut can influence neurotransmitters, stress, anxiety, mood, behavior. Likewise, the brain also has a big influence on our gut motility, right? If anyone ever find themselves running to the bathroom when you're nervous, right? Gut secretions, nutrient delivery, microbial balance also is influenced by the brain. So it's bidirectional. It's a two-way street, not just, what the brain talking to our gut. It goes both ways. So as we talk about, important nutrients for brain health, what nutrients do we want to focus on? And some of these maybe you're probably familiar with, and I've listed a lot of different nutrients here, but we're going to focus on them for the next 15 minutes or so. So long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, minerals like zinc and magnesium, selenium, iron, potassium, all really important minerals for your brain. The B vitamins, B6, B12, folate, choline. Choline isn't a B vitamin, it's kind of a cousin to a B vitamin, but also really important. Vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E. All of these different nutrients that you find in food are kind of, a lot of them are kind of the building blocks for some of these neurotransmitters, right? We know that to make some of these neurotransmitters, we need zinc, we need B6, we need folate. So B12. So, it stands to reason that if we have a diet that kind of isn't all that great, we're not going to get a lot of these nutrients. So what are the 5 nutritional strategies to improve on for your brain health? Well, we want to eat some high octane fuel, happy fats, eating the rainbow, fermented foods, and getting spicy. And we're not going to have time for the odd bits today. All right. So number 1 would be to think of your brain as a race car. most of us aren't driving Maseratis, right? But I'm informed by the teenager in my family that if you have a race car, you don't want to put crappy fuel in a race car. That race car is not going to perform very well. You need high octane fuel, the really good quality fuel. And so if you think of your brain in the same way, if we want our brain to function at its best, we need to put high quality fuel in it. So what would be the high quality fuel, and what's the low quality fuel? What's the low octane fuel, which is going to make a really expensive race car ping and sputter and not perform very well? Well, basically, it's the standard American diet, right? This is kind of the junk fuel, that the human version of low octane fuel. This would be these highly processed foods that are high in sugar, high in refined oils, high in refined fats, additives. All of these things not only, contain a lot of calories and fat and sugar, but the other thing that happens is that it doesn't really provide any micronutrients, right? Why is this diet so kind of bad for brain health? What are the pathways? Well, one would be oxidative stress. Oxidative stress, if you think about what antioxidants do, is antioxidants donate an electron to help minimize oxidation. So without enough antioxidants to do this, something called oxidative stress occurs, right? When we don't have enough antioxidants to neutralize free radicals, we get oxidative stress. Inflammation we know is kind of the root cause of many chronic diseases, but inflammation is really highly correlated with being poor for our brain health. Inflammation in our brain is correlated with increased rates of depression, anxiety, increased rates of dementia. So whatever we can do to kind of prevent inflammation is important. And that kind of, junk food diet is damaging to our gut microbiome. And it's just deficient in all the essential nutrients for not only our brain health, but also in the formation of all of these different neurotransmitters as well. So what are some other, specifically when we speak about eating kind of maybe better brain healthy foods, what are we talking about specifically? And one of the main things to pay attention to is a type of fat. As I mentioned, our brain is mostly fat and water. And so the type of fat that we eat becomes really, really important because it influences what fats are actually structurally in our cell membranes. One of the important fats is something called omega-3 fatty acids. And what do these are this long chain polyunsaturated fatty acids. What do? They help brain cells communicate with each other. They help our mitochondria perform more effectively. They decrease inflammation. So they're really kind of crucial for brain health. Where do we find these omega-3 fatty acids? Well, most of us kind of know one of the biggest places to find omega-3 fatty acids is in seafood. And so when we're talking about happy fats, we find a lot of these kind of happiness promoting fats in seafood, specifically fatty fish that contain a lot of these omega-3s called EPA and DHA. And these are kind of the biologically active preformed omega-3s that our brain can use. The other benefits of seafood is you get the minerals zinc and selenium and B12. Seafood is really, really high in these minerals and B12 vitamins. So, and all of these are crucial for our brain health. It's interesting, maybe you've heard about your grandmother talk about brain food. I see this one person had mentioned on brain food, and brain food, more than 100 years ago, I kind of did a Google search on it. Even more than 100 years ago, people, even before they knew anything about omega-3s really, and their influence on brain health was discovered, people always referred to seafood as brain food. I remember my grandmother saying, oh, seafood is brain food. And as a kid, maybe I didn't like seafood all that much. So I'm like, oh, I can pass on the seafood. So it is a really great source of brain food. So if someone here says, okay, what if you're allergic to seafood, shellfish, what can you substitute? So there are, excellent question. There are plant-based sources of the omega-3s, and it's called alpha-linolenic acid, and it's a precursor to the EPA and DHA. The conversion rate can be low in some people, so not everyone is a great converter over. So one of the things that you can do is take an algae supplement, and that's actually where the fish get it from. They get it from eating the algae, and then a small fish eats the algae, and a bigger fish eats that, and so on and so forth down the food chain. So that would be an option too, if you wanted directly to get the DHA. But you can find alpha-linolenic acid in some leafy greens, particularly seeds like flaxseed and chia seeds. Flax seeds you need to grind, just kind of a side note. You will pass them undigested, so they do need to be ground. Chia seeds don't need to be ground. You can just eat them as is. Hemp seeds contain some omega-3 fatty acids. Now, not all nuts contain omega-3 fatty acids. All nuts contain a lot of polyunsaturated fatty acids, which are very helpful for brain, which can be helpful for brain health. But walnuts are really your best bet. You do find a little bit in chestnuts. You do find a little bit in Brazil nuts. Brazil nuts are also extremely high in selenium. So they are also really a kind of an overall good nut. Very high in fat, but do contain some great sources of selenium. You only need 2 Brazil nuts to get 100% of the daily value of selenium. And what does this look like? This looks like a brain, right? So this is kind of nature's way of telling you, eat some walnuts. It's good for your brain, because walnuts do contain a lot of those omega-3 fatty acids. Now, nuts and seeds in general are good sources of all kinds of things, including vitamin E, magnesium, zinc, fiber, phytonutrients. So what kind of ways can you get some extra nuts and seeds? I like to sometimes make these little energy bites with flax seeds, peanut butter, a little bit of dark chocolate chips. I make chia seed pudding. I mix it with a plant-based milk. If you've ever made chia seed pudding, it's very easy to make, and it's basically 4 parts plant-based milk to 1 part chia seeds. I personally like soy milk because it's highest in protein, and then you can add in, a little bit of cocoa powder if you want, maybe a little bit of peanut butter, some chopped fruit, and that's kind of a nice way to get chia seeds. Or sometimes, my 2 o'clock snack, sometimes I'll mix some Brazil nuts and goji berries and dark chocolate chips. So also another great way to get a lot of these important nutrients for your brain. And then the other thing is to kind of maybe cut back a little bit on some pro-inflammatory fats. So different some fats contain omega-6 fatty acids, right? That's another type of polyunsaturated long-chain fatty acid. And omega-6 can increase inflammation a little bit. And our body's a balance. We need the inflammation, and we need kind of anti-inflammation as well, right? And so we kind of want a ratio of maybe 4 to 1 of omega-6s to omega-3s. But the problem is in our diet, because we eat so much processed food and we eat out, and we're eating these excessive amounts of these highly refined oils that contain omega-6, that are really high in omega-6 fatty acids, instead of getting them directly from the nuts and the seeds themselves, that potentially that balance is off and we're getting more inflammation. Fried foods are particularly problematic, because they do, when you're heating up these oils over and over and over again to these high temperatures, you do get potentially a lot of these dangerous compounds that are formed that are really high in free radicals. So enjoy, your nuts and your seeds and these omega-6 fatty acids. Ideally, in a organic form, expeller pressed, enjoying as seeds and kind of just cutting down processed food in general. One of the best types of oils is extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is really high in another type of fat called that contains omega-9 fatty acids. Okay, the other thing is to eat the rainbow. So eating lots of plants will give us fiber, which is really important for our gut microbiome, lots of vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. Phytochemicals are these chemicals that you find in plants that provide the color, they provide the taste, they provide nutrition for the plant, and they protect the plant. When we talk about food as medicine, right, here you go. All of these different colors are different types of, medicine, if we want to consider it that way. If we were to take an all-natural banana and do a chemical analysis of it, here's what we would find. But guess what? All of these phytochemicals are phytochemicals that your body recognizes and says, okay, great, here's our medicine. Versus, packaged food that is going to have an entirely different phytochemical makeup. So leafy greens that contain a lot of folate. And folate is one of the B vitamins that's essential for your brain. So getting in leafy greens wherever you can, one of the kind of foundations of brain health, right? So maybe you mix some with some eggs in the morning, or you make a scrambled tofu with some leafy greens. You do a green smoothie. You saute some greens with some mushrooms. Leafy greens are really easy to add to soup. I always add them into soup. So you can add in some kale, some I'm trying to think of what's that bitter green, escarole, that I just added into my soup yesterday. Spinach, all of these leafy greens are really wonderful. And then, of course, adding in some fermented foods. As we had talked about at the beginning, that correlation between your gut microbiome and the fact that your gut microbiome talks to your brain. And so many studies really show this high correlation with having beneficial gut microbiota is highly, highly correlated with lower rates of depression and anxiety. So adding in some fermented foods, getting some kimchi, some sauerkraut, some kefir, fermented pickles, all of these things can be really, really great for your gut microbiome, as well as your immune function. So many different reasons why this is good. Now, the other reason why we really want to take care of our gut microbiome is that by eating these fermented foods, and actually foods with a lot of fiber and the prebiotics that we're feeding our gut microbiome, that can then, these beneficial bacteria produce something called postbiotics. And postbiotics are these short chain fatty acids that are produced by the bacteria in our gut that are beneficial to our brain, especially. So that's another way that our gut microbiome really influences our brain health. So take care of your gut in whatever way and form you can. And then lastly, number 5 is to get spicy. So lots and lots of studies actually on turmeric. That's one of the most highly studied spices that shows it can decrease anxiety, decrease depression, inflammation. Saffron also is another spice that's been really highly correlated with better sleep, decreased anxiety. All of these spices, when we talk about food as medicine, spices also kind of come into my mind first thing as food as medicine, and they've been really used for thousands of years. And the studies are really quite remarkable in spices. Now, if you think about it, we're not really eating all that much spice, right? You might put in a quarter teaspoon of nutmeg, maybe into a cream sauce or something like that. Anyone ever add too much nutmeg to like a dish? And maybe you're supposed to put in a quarter teaspoon, but you misread the recipe and you added a teaspoon, and you're like, oh my gosh, all I taste is nutmeg. I added in a teaspoon. How is it so strong? Well, that's all that strong that we talk about. That's all coming from these phytochemicals that are these highly concentrated in spices. So as much as you can get, adding in some spices wherever you can is also beneficial. All right, lastly, in terms of supplements for brain health, here's the algae omega. I noticed somebody mentioned krill oil, also great. We know, getting some fresh air, some sunlight, making sure that you're getting enough vitamin D, also highly correlated with brain health. And during the wintertime, maybe when we're not getting out as much, maybe you take 1,000 IUs of vitamin D per day. Magnesium is also correlated with better sleep, decreased anxiety. So if you feel like maybe your diet is not super stellar and you're not getting any great sources of it, you can consider supplements as well. But we always say food first. All right. And lastly, of course, taking care of yourself, right? How do you increase your resiliency overall? You increase your brain health. You take care of yourself, maybe meditation, practicing mindfulness, getting enough sleep, exercise, positive attitude. All of these things are really important as well. So we have a couple minutes for questions, and I'll open it up to some questions. I'm seeing here, let's see, somebody mentioned soak chia seeds for at least half an hour, so they're more jello-like. Bigelow makes a green tea with turmeric. It's amazing. That's interesting. Someone here mentioned green tea. Green tea is kind of one of these nutritional superstars as well. I do a longer version of this talk that's longer than half an hour, and green tea is one of the teas that I highlight. It contains a lot of really important plant chemicals called polyphenols, and that green tea is also correlated with boosting your immune function. A lot of benefits of green tea, helping to, I should say, modulate your immune function. But green tea also contains some compounds that help to kind of calm you down while still not making you sleepy, right? So something also to consider. So any questions in the last minute or two that we have? Thank you all for contributing. It was nice to see your comments there. And oh goodness, okay, someone is asking, what about coconut oil? Really interesting, and I think a lot more research needs to be done. We know coconut oil is really high in saturated fat, which some studies correlate as not being the best for our brain. But coconut oil is also high in medium chain triglycerides, which can be beneficial for brain health. So I would say the jury is still out on coconut oil. It is a very stable oil. So in terms of using it for high heat cooking, if I'm going to make a stir fry high heat, I will use coconut oil because it's so stable. So I wouldn't start supplementing your diet with coconut oil, but certainly to use some here and there for cooking, I think is a great thing to do. So thank you all so much for your kind words, and I'm so glad that you all could join me here today. So I will not see any other questions. Oh, one quick question. Can you explain DHA again? The best way to get it is opposed to seeds. So just really quickly, DHA is the type of omega-3s that you find in fatty fish. You also find it in algae oil and krill oil, for that matter. DHA is the preferred type of omega-3 that our brain uses. And so the more kind of fatty fish that you can eat, the better it's going to be. So things like salmon, herring, mackerel, sardines, salmon. One of my favorite snacks is just opening up a can of sardines. And sometimes if I'm looking for a quick and easy lunch, I just want a bunch of nutrition, super quick, I will literally open up a can of sardines, dump it in a bowl, and that's my lunch. I don't know if we have any other sardine lovers out there that do the same thing, but you know, when talk about like a lunch with a lot of bang for your buck, that's a great one. So, all right, everyone. Thank you so much. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye. Thanks, Andrea.